Well, hello everyone to another episode of ND and ABA with Martin and Dan. I'm your host Martin. Alongside is my colleague and co-host Dan. Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back again here on ND and ABA. And once again, we have some wonderful guests for you guys. We have Dr. Jennifer Haddock and Dr. Nassim here, also known as at Everyday Behaviorist and at the Dubai Autism Doctor on Instagram. So welcome, you guys. Welcome to the show. It's a episode 5 of our ND and ABA podcast. So we're very proud to have made it so far. And we want to thank everybody who's listened and everyone who's come on the show and supported us. We really appreciate you guys. So, pat yourself on the back early. It's coming out fast this time. We're going to get out of the way. Pat it, okay? Because we've got lots to talk about. Um, one of the things in particular today we really want to highlight is the audience for behavioral support worldwide. And when I say behavioral support, I mean the way behavioral principles are used in a supportive manner, no matter what the context. A lot of people know of applied behavior analysis, or ABA, and they also know about the history and some of the media surrounding it in the current day and age we live in. And all of that stuff needs exposure. We need to talk about it. Though today, we're going to talk about some common behavioral principles that we might take for granted. And we thank you guys for having patience, because some of this might be wordy. And that's why we brought the big guns out today. We brought the doctors on the show. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Jennifer Haddock over here. Jennifer, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Oh yeah, this is well worth an extra cup of coffee or two just to, plan out some great questions for you. First thing I really wanted to ask you about is, how you implement sort of natural teaching strategies, not just to those who are receivers and consumers of ABA services, but to people like me and others online who watch your reels and learn about ABA through the context of your career and just your passion for, I think, is spreading the truth, right? I like how you said, I'm not here as competition. I think it's your first rule.
Yeah.
I want you to see my life through truthful and a valid lens. And great stuff, by the way. So
Thank you.
yeah, natural teaching. I know you taught me with your garden and so forth, but how else do you use that in everyday life?
Okay, so well, that's a complicated question, and I love it. And I want to preface by saying that Dan and Martin did not prep me in any way. So these
No.
are totally off the cuff answers. Um, but I think I use naturalistic teaching, incidental teaching with other people in context when it's appropriate and when it can happen in the situation. Regarding my blog and my dissemination efforts, I use myself as an example a lot of times just because I have access to private events and I know all the variables that control, or I know a lot of the variables that control my behavior. I can speak to them. And so I can put it out there in a way that I think other people can relate to, and they might be able to take from that and say, oh, that's kind of like how I do this. And if I give enough examples, they might start to pick up on principles without even knowing it. And so that's kind of my approach with my blog is I give personal examples, and sometimes I hit people over the head and I'm like, hey, you do this thing, identify this in your life. But other times I'm just like, I'm a flawed human and I put it out there in a behaviorally interpreted way and hope that other people can say, huh, me too. But I can take that and learn from that. Um, and then
Oh,
when it comes to teaching other people, like in a everyday situation, I don't know that I have one approach to that. It just kind of, I pick and choose my battles, I guess. And they're not really battles, they're incidental teaching moments. But I kind of use the same approach, just a gentle leading people to their own solution, kind
yeah,
of.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's funny that you do say picking battles because I do think of a concept of, thinking about how many demands you're placing on the audience, right? As
Yeah.
well, right? We do have what is called, response effort, and basically, if that's too high for people, a lot of times they're not going to want to engage. And I think maybe that's where natural teaching, incidental teaching, it helps a lot with behavior and through applied behavior analysis, but also just for parenting to use the natural environment at hand as a teaching moment, right? As a teaching moments. We always use that word. Educators all over, they're finding the teaching moments in the day, and what that is incidental teaching, right? Right, natural environment teaching, and the idea is to be least intrusive, right? And
Yeah.
to take it
Yes.
another level, like when I see even you using the incidental teaching in your life, but in my life, it comes in on my phone through a scrolling, algorithm. It's also a form of incidental teaching because I would have been scrolling around anyways, basically.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm not scrolling into trouble. I'm scrolling into education. Okay, anybody who
Exactly.
scrolled into Jennifer or Dr. Nassim or our friend Brian Middleton, bearded behaviorist, or Dr. Megan De Leon, Dr. Do Better, a lot of those people, you're not scrolling into trouble if you go into just get some education, hear what's going on in the world, and prepare yourself from some riveting discussions you're probably going to have if you're working as a professional, or if you have a child who receives ABA services, then you're going to encounter these things. It's important to stay informed. So, thanks so much for being on the show. I was wondering, another thing that you often talk about is the misconceptions
Yeah.
surrounding applied behavior analysis. So I'll give you the chance to just highlight, what do you think are maybe the main misconceptions that
Oh,
might be harmful in the current age?
I don't know. I don't have, I feel I can't speak off the cuff to what the most common misconceptions are. I know what I've seen the misconceptions to be, and I know that in a recent paper I reviewed on my Instagram account was Morris 1983 and 1985, two different papers where he talks about misconceptions. And so some of them then were that um, back in the 80s were that we focus primarily with non-humans. And I think probably if someone were to update that paper and identify systematically the misconceptions, the top one that would come out would be that ABA is specific to autism service delivery, which has not been the case in the literature. It's not been the case in our applications and clinical work, but that happens to be a common misconception because that's the majority of our field is focused on autism service delivery.
Totally. And you know what? On that note, we want to say that behavioral principles apply to every living being, everything in the universe, perhaps. I will go that far to say it's not just people with autism or autistic people. It's not just a service that people who have behavioral challenges use. Even the
Right.
ABA is in the workforce through organizational behavioral management, OBM, as well as a subset of ABA, and also through sports improvement, sports performance. All those concepts. If you were in baseball and you were like, man, I gotta visualize the end, and I gotta see the home run, and I've gotta connect the shoulder to the belt. You know what I mean? And make it all one fluid behavior, right? You think you're not using behaviorism in that, then
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you, you got another thing coming.
Yeah.
But basically, uh, if you see the baseball hits you enough in the head, then you start to think about these things. Uh, okay. But basically, there are a lot of misconceptions that ABA is only a service for autistic individuals and their families, and that's just not the case. It happens to be, though, that this community of autistic individuals does rely on ABA providers to support them and their families in a lot of ways. And it's important for us to see the responsibility we have now to be there for autistic communities. Martin, is there anything
Hmm.
you might want to say? I do want to ask Dr. Nassim about
Yeah,
conceptions as well, but you have a
yeah.
good voice for this kind of thing as well. I want to give you a chance.
I don't know if this is a misconception. I don't know if anybody else has seen this, but I've noticed with some ABA companies that are expanding rapidly, they focus less on the quality of the service given and more of like the expansion I've noticed with some places. I've seen some autistics who go through ABA and they end up regressing because the service isn't as great as it used to be. So is that a possible misconception, or is it because with some of these companies that are growing fast, they just don't focus on the quality than when they were a smaller company or something like that? I'm trying to word it a little bit better, but is that something that you've noticed?
You know what? I have, Martin, and I'm glad you brought it up, especially because we have Dr. Nassim here. I think he's a
Mm,
little bit more able to navigate some of
mm,
the
okay.
business conversations than
Oh,
maybe you
okay.
or I. Dr. Nassim, I'd like to turn it over to you. And first, if you could maybe tell us a little bit about your business experience and yeah, what from your perspective as a business owner is possibly a misconception or perhaps a slippery slope for other business owners in the terms of maybe ethical compliance or profitability, productivity? I'll turn it over to you, whatever you feel is most important.
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you for having me. I've been excited about this podcast for some time. I do want to apologize to Dr. Shane.
Oh yeah, Dr. Shane Spiker.
Yeah, okay, because I know he stepped in and so just my hats off to him, and I love what he had to say. I've listened to all the podcasts and just excited to be here. Yeah, the
Awesome.
misconceptions. You know what's interesting? I've been a behavior analyst since 2006, longer than most people that are still practicing, at least.
Mhm.
Um, and we dove heavily into the misconceptions during our coursework. Um, and I love the one that Jennifer brought up because we're entangled in the way that we can even answer this question. So, like Dan said, yes, reinforcement is for everything in the universe. I second that. If you put a plant next to the window, what's going to happen? It's going to lean towards the sun, towards what it needs, the reinforcement. It's yes, it works on animals. Absolutely. Would you want it not to? It's the science of change. So
Mhm.
so when I talk to someone, I try to understand why are they trying to even highlight that there's a difference. So there's so many, and we can go into to all of them, but I think it's really important because more often than not, I come across misconceptions than anybody correcting them. And when people correct them, I've made the mistake of trying to do that. Well, in a nice, professional and courteous way, but it's sometimes it's individuals are not receptive to it, and I'm glad that we're here doing this because hopefully it'll be a start to focusing more on these misconceptions. Let me think of one that I've yeah, like it's just for autism or just for dogs, or it's very robotic in nature. So I love in the previous podcasts how you discussed the more what's referred to as pivotal response training, PRT, or
Mhm.
natural. And I love how you've gone into what Dr. Hanley has. I'm a big proponent of that. But the robotics and what a lot of individuals, Lovas and Skinner, you know, the, let's say discrete trial training. If you're trying to teach numbers or letters, these splinter skills, it can come in handy. I'm not a big supporter of DTT. I'll still run it in some cases, but 99% of the time I want it to be naturalistic environment. I want it to be precision teaching. I want to pick up on every moment. Nobody should know that you're doing ABA. If when parents say, oh, my child can't handle x amount of hours in ABA, it immediately just, and it's not the parents' fault. It's not their field. We're here and we need to speak up. They're wrong. They're incorrect because if you're doing ABA correctly, the child should never even know it. We're doing it to each other. Dan said it earlier. It's happening all the time, every moment, from the second we're born to the day we die. and you can't really get away from that. And so I don't know. I could go into lots of them. I think they're really interesting. But that could be a whole podcast, I think, in and of itself. But you did mention, some concerns that the field has. I got to tell you. Okay, so I have a long history. I'll just go through it quick. I have bachelor's in science in psychology, and I have a double master's. I have a master's in ABA in counseling and a PhD in clinical psychology. So I'm 45. I've been in this field really long time, and I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot. Um, I'm not going to name names or providers, but I'm sure we've all seen our fair share of unethical whatever. I've
Yeah.
seen it from everywhere. I've seen it
I'll
from
take a
our
sip of
board.
coffee for that.
Yeah,
I think we're all just gulping one down. Like, yes, we've seen quite a few of those, haven't we?
and I don't mean to come off as like I'm super excited about this field. I'm opening another center just down the street here in Massachusetts. I'm here from Dubai doing that because the field has just gotten started. People are asking me, "Oh, don't you think there are too many service providers?" My opinion is no, not at all. And the
Mhm.
ones that I've been to, around the world, unfortunately, they're doing the best they can with the situation we've been given. No one has organized a protocol to provide ABA services to children with autism. For example, in Massachusetts in 2010, ARICA passed, an act relative to insurance coverage for autism. All of a sudden, you have everyone that can, access these services. Well, who's going to provide these services? 3 years later, our state insurance, Mass Health, and then across the US. And so what happened? People who were, had OT providers, daycares, and you name it, they started hiring BCBAs and trying to get involved in this. And, that can happen with any field, but our field is rather new, especially with the insurance and everything. In 2010, I worked closely with at the State House to actually create the coding for the insurance companies for Blue Cross and Aetna and Cigna, these things. And so, yeah, I can talk about ABA forever. I'm just going to stop there. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it, but maybe we
Mhm.
can discuss a couple of solutions that I'm working towards currently and have been for some time. I have LinkedIn articles that anyone can access that speak very, very clearly and in depth about some of these things that I'm saying.
Certainly, and everybody, please do check out Dr. Nassim on LinkedIn and Dr. Jennifer Haddock as well. We're going to put the links in the description for you guys, and Instagram we mentioned earlier. One of the things that you mentioned, which is I think important, is the history and development of what happened and how is it that ABA became the what is referred to as the gold standard of treatment from the insurance standpoint, right? Where it now is basically uh, popularized in a lot of ways in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia by either public or private insurance resources. And the reason for that is for a while there was a lot of data coming out to show the great improvements, the great effects of ABA, and a high percentage rate was highly effective in helping to increase the quality of life for individuals. Though there's a lot, I'm sure, swept under the rug, just as a lot of things were swept under the rug 10 to 15 years ago, and we're just kind of now coming to grips with them as a society. So there's almost like this little bit of a Me Too movement in ABA that is a very important thing. There's
Right.
let's say the Me Too movement is always evolving too. There was Me Too with with Bill Cosby starting out, and then to expand upon that, they actually kind of uh, flipped it when Johnny Depp and his significant
Mm.
other went to the courts, right? And they had that, and it's sort of expanding to what is the broader sense of who are we considering is basically being taken advantage of as a part of the innate systems in society. And in reality, when you look at it, people, that has nothing to do with behavioral principles. That's sort of an industry and a political thing that perhaps we should be a little bit more active in legislation on working towards solutions regarding. And for instance, it might be a lot better productivity wise, if we were able to come up with some programs that they have in other countries where they have ABA, for us in the United States, I know there is public programs in Australia, though I know they get a lot of flack, and perhaps there's a balance there. What is the ethics involved in trying to fund an organization, and there's the ethics involved in providing services,
Yes, excellent
clinical
point.
quality. Yeah, clinical quality. So let's just
Fine
bring it
line, fine line there.
uh,
Yeah.
we'll bring it back there. Clinical quality is not something that exists in many places in the world, actually, right now. And Dr. Nassim, I know you've been sort of exposing a lot of different communities to ABA, maybe even for the first time in the concept of helping people with behavioral difficulties and autistic people and people all around, I'm sure, who receive ABA, maybe even adults, older people as well, receiving benefits from these services that they've never even heard of. So I'd like you to, maybe if you could highlight a little more, where is the need worldwide? Where is maybe the knowledge lacking so that we can get everyone off to the right foot, right? When they learn about behaviorism and behavioral principles, and not so much the business of applied behavior analysis as it is.
Right. Right. It's like I said, it's a fine line having it be a business and, you know, and being ethical. It's a very fine line, and it is so with the entire healthcare field. We know that. They say, hospitals want to keep you sick. I'm not going down conspiracy theory routes, but it just happens, happens naturally. But let's say, like in Dubai, for example, I'm the director for Maharat Learning Center in Dubai. They have branches in Saudi Arabia, and they're opening soon in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Martin talks, both Martin and Dan, you both talk a lot about awareness and acceptance. I don't even think we have awareness. I know, Martin and you and everyone, we're all pushing towards acceptance. There's literally no awareness. I've,
Yeah.
in Dubai, it's so challenging because autism is still considered a stigma, and one may think, what did that mother do to displease God for this child to now have autism? And so when we run into these situations, it's challenging. We have to navigate it very carefully. There's culture clashes, and so the field itself has just a lot of growth to do. But what I'm really excited about is something I'm working closely with a couple organizations. I can't name them for NDA purposes, but I believe in the future we won't have autism service providers who have more than one BCBA under the roof. BCBAs, I believe, should be either owning their own companies where they're going to care about the company, they're going to care about the number of clients they have and how well they're doing with them, because the bottom line is that this is their how they make their money. They can't just leave and for $5,000 more a year to the next provider who's looking to steal that individual, or even that individual and a client at the same time. So I developed a franchise. It's complete. I have everything: the franchise, the purchase and sale, the NDA, etc. And I'm only just now putting it into play. Um, and so, for example, at Maharat, Dr. Hiba, the founder, knows BCBAs all over. She was the first ABA autism service provider in Dubai, and she spread to Saudi, etc. But she's been there for a long time, and she has BCBAs all over the world. Name a country, you probably she knows someone there. And so, what this will allow us to do is get these BCBAs involved, parents who are now running programs and becoming more ABA inclined than some RBTs that I know. There's a lot of watering down, I think, with the online content nowadays. Dan, you brought a good point about how we used to look and say, wow, look at the evidence. It's showing it's a math. It's a science like a math. I always say ABA is a science. 2 + 2 = 4 always. That's why it's a science. ABA, it's like it's the science of change, science of behavior. You have to do the math right. Do you have enough OT hours? Does the child need speech that's missing? Or there's so many complications we know as BCBAs, so many. But so Yeah. So again, I can talk a lot about this, but I'll end it by saying the reason for this is BCBAs should be working, like I said, for themselves or for schools, et cetera, because competition that's inherently bred in service providers and the way that a BCBA is able to leave maybe 10 or 15 cases without a BCBA. And in Massachusetts, now you can't provide service. The therapist can't go out there because you don't have a BCBA. So again, I'm preaching to the choir because you guys know all this. So the intention behind the franchise is literally to solve every concern you can imagine. And I know that sounds like
Yes.
it's impossible, but that's really what we're doing and where we're heading.
Really important point there, Dr. Nassim. That's probably why we're here right now. So you know what? It is called ND and ABA. We're here to raise awareness and acceptance for autistic communities, for neurodiverse communities, for neurodivergent individuals, as well as raise awareness about ABA and how we can move the field forward to align both communities and come forward together. I think right now we're actually at an interesting what if you were referring to pivotal response training earlier, we would call a behavioral cusp as a society, right? And neurodiversity is, I think, that cusp, right? We're coming up to this point where, okay, now we're actually starting to view autism, ADHD, every single different type of maybe personality or diagnosis you could think of, or any different type of trait, even certain things like hyperlexia, reading super fast, I mentioned before, but monotropism, if you like things to be same and focus on one thing at a time, all these things, neuro traits, they're coming in to our mind and our behaviors to make more data-based decisions. And ultimately, we're going to have new behaviors as a society, acknowledging this perspective of the neurodiverse community. And ABA can work well within that sphere, I want to say, and it should work with the people who are researching neurodiversity in order to produce the best practices going forward. Jennifer, I know you have a lot of best practices up your sleeve. Can you highlight some of the really beneficial best practices? Like Dr. Nassim had said, ABA is intended to solve
I
every.
didn't say that.
Sorry. Behaviorism applies to everything under the sun, much as the sun non-contingently.
We have to look at genetics and history of reinforcement
Yes.
and
And
environment,
so
etc.
back to you, Jennifer. Sorry about that. I do want to clarify. Thank
I
you,
just
guys.
wanted it out there. That's all.
You know what? That's why I had the doctors on the show, because I need somebody to keep me on my toes, basically. I don't want to get too cocky out here. I'm kind of a loose cannon, if you guys haven't been able to tell.
My type of guy.
But Jennifer, what are those best practices that you feel like are in most need of highlighting to give a good name for behavior analysis?
Oh gosh. Oh, you extended your question. You made it longer. Okay. So I bet you thought I would say like FBA or FCT and like things like that. But I think the best practices that some people might need to hear are taking data and graphing your data, not taking data on too many targets that you can't visually analyze your data, getting reliability data, getting procedural reliability data on your therapist's behavior compliance with the protocols that you have in place, whether they're doing the steps correctly, whether they're providing the reinforcers like they should. That's the big thing. Identifying whether your reinforcers are actually reinforcers, whether they're increasing behavior in the future. Right. And you can only do that through visual analysis of your data. So that's back to the data. That's why I said that number one.
And might I add, by identifying punishers is also, behavior analysis. If people are being punished, ABA can be used to remove that from, get rid of that injustice for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just being more analysts, putting the analysis back in behavior analysis, I think, and stop being so tied to this is the way I've learned to do it. Just really going towards your data, looking towards your data, talking to your consumers about what they want, educating parents about neurodiversity and how this is a culture that needs recognition, and we're not erasing the core symptoms anymore. We're not doing that. But as a field, we just should not be doing that. And sorry, my introverbals get loose.
Hey, that's all right, you know.
No
And I see what
worries.
you're saying too, because like the eye contact conversation, let's put that as an example. It's really not necessary for autistic people or anybody to be like, hey
Yeah.
guys, um, hey, sure, I'll do that all the time. No worries. You know what I mean? Like that's so unnecessary, and nobody. Have you ever seen anybody really comply like that unless they're under stress or some kind of pressure?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Martin, I know you have a something really exciting going on this month, and I want to give you some space
Yeah,
really to talk to our guests about it before they
right.
go.
But
Would you
before
like
I do,
to?
I
Oh,
just
go ahead.
thought of one more question to ask both our guests today,
Hmm.
because I'll give you a little backstory. And I hope this is not a difficult question. I mean, I'm not bashing any behavior specialist that comes to the field or anything, but when I joined the field, I knew nothing about ABA. I'm in my 5th year. I knew nothing about it, and some people are hired. They only get maybe 1 or 2 weeks of training at that. So, do both of you have any advice for a new behavior specialist that joins the field that really isn't sure where to start
Can I
when they
say
get?
something about that?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's such an important question. Um, I mentioned earlier briefly that the services are watered down.
Hmm.
When I was obtaining my master's in applied behavior analysis, I had,
Hmm.
my bosses who were the creators of the master's program that I was in over me, at least 8 hours a week, I want to say, in
Right,
supervision, and then literally telling me, no, Nassim, that's not right. Nassim, you see what just happened there? That's not happening anymore, not even close, not even
right,
close. And so what you're saying, and I just want to tie that directly to another ABA conception, which is it doesn't work. I think it's just so ridiculous for someone not to first look at, is the parent training effective? Are they on
right.
board? How many, all the questions. But
Hmm.
yeah, it needs a lot more supervision, and the field's just growing too fast. But this is again
Hmm.
another podcast
Yeah.
subject.
Oh my gosh, totally Nassim. And now I want to have you on again. I just
I'd
want to
love
let
to.
it know it
Anytime,
is
I'd love
that
it.
way now. You know, like let's say even 5 years ago, I was starting in the field. I would say something like, we can't
Right,
assign
right. We had
a
to speak behavior analytically. You're right.
yeah.
In
I'd be like,
in
we can't
class,
do
we
that.
couldn't. Yep, yep. You're right.
Sometimes I would literally have to say, that's just wrong. And people would say, oh, you know what? Actually, I see. He's just young. That's the problem.
See,
Right?
and
Something
it's like
like that.
ABA of then and ABA now. Really, I say
Hmm.
kind of the old school and the new school. I say it all the time because it's just tragic. We need to do something about it. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but back to you, Jennifer. I know you have to go soon, but I want you to give you some space to answer the question, and maybe even if you'd like to raise awareness for anything going on right now, please do. But what do you think about new RBTs and just getting into the field from the get-go at the first day, through the first month, and starting in, what is your advice that is going to best benefit those members of our audience that they're hearing all this stuff in the media each day, like grappling with these concepts all the time?
Okay, so my advice to new technicians in the field, I think, is to advocate for yourself, advocate for your learning, learn about other if your company is not giving you the training needs that you feel like you need, ask for it. Ask for it. And you can start to look around. There are a lot of ABA companies out there, and a lot of them are doing good work. Um,
Hmm.
our company is investing in training, and because we want to provide support to this generation of behavior analysts, and it sounds like Dr. Nassim's company is doing that as well. And I think so, advocating for yourself, learning, social media is a great resource for learning. like Dan said earlier, you're not scrolling into trouble, you could be scrolling into education. So looking
Mhm.
for accounts that have quality content, not just that superficial clickbait kind of content, but like actually teaching you something, and follow those people, stick with them. I guess those are my two kind of off the
Yeah.
top of my head pieces of advice to new folks. And
Oh
if
yeah.
you love it, you do stick with it, because the kids like find joy in your everyday job. That third piece of
Yeah.
advice to every behavior analyst, I think. Um, we respond on thin schedules of reinforcement, right? We probably all got into the field because we like to help people, but it
Yep.
takes a lot of work to help people and produce those meaningful changes. So that's a lot of lever pressing. So to mediate that delay, you can look to all the good that you're doing, all those little tiny micro moments of joy in your sessions, and just really focus on those. So yeah, three pieces of advice.
Awesome.
I
All right.
love
Thank
the
you.
first one, all of them, but especially the first one. I always say the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and parents that do advocate for themselves, they're just tremendously proficient in applying the ABA, methodology and just finding success. So I love that.
Oh yeah, pat yourself on the back, parents. Here's another one. Oh, actually, it has to go on this side because I don't want you to soar. I know you're dealing with all sorts of pats.
Yeah.
Back to you, Martin. I know you got something really
Mhm.
exciting going on this month, and a
Yeah.
few things actually, I think, right?
Yeah. I would say one fun thing that actually happening on the 27th is I'm starting my first Special Olympics competition for track and field. It is the first time I'm ever going to be competing. Very excited about that. But I recently got an email from an instructor at Santa Clara University, and they invited me out to be a guest lecturer on the 27th and speak about my journey and give some pointers on ways for an autistic to transition from, middle school to high school to college, because it's very, for some of us, transitioning from school is a lot more difficult and needs more time. And had I gotten more time to get that transition from high school to college, it would have been so much easier. So it's I thought I was just going to be speaking. I was not expected to actually teach a class. So that was
Wow,
the biggest thing that I've got coming up.
awesome.
Wow. You know what, Martin? You're a superhero, dude. I
Can I
Yeah.
say
tell you
this
a
all
funny
the time.
story about Martin, how we met?
Oh, oh my gosh.
No, no,
I
this is
yeah,
honestly just I'll make this real brief. But we met
yeah, no
in
worries.
Dubai. I have a practice autism intervention specialist out there. I founded that in 2020. But oh my goodness, I was so excited to tell the
No,
story. I
I
must have lost
remember.
my
I
train of thought.
remember.
Yeah,
So
no, no, I almost
yeah.
lost my train of thought. So Martin
Oh
went
yeah.
up. We were both speakers, and Martin went up
Oh my.
before me, and he like I guess he said he was nervous or whatever, but he was incredible. I went up there, and literally the first thing I said was, "I'm not going to be as calm, cool, and collected as Martin."
That's what I
Was,
tell him all the time. Oh my
Oh,
and it
God.
was
okay.
true. It's true. I wish I had his composure, and
Mhm.
I work tirelessly to try. Yeah. So I it's just such a funny story. And Dan, I didn't know if you even knew that I had met Martin in Dubai, but yeah, that was.
Oh yeah, I just found out recently, and you know what? In Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, there's a lot of good behavior analytic work going on. So anybody who's checking that out, please, look into it. All over the world. I want to shout out to my friends at Neuro Inclusion Labs out in Dubai as well. They've been a big supporter of us for a while, actually. As soon as I founded Da Vinci, we've been friends, and so I like to say, from Hawaii to Dubai, we're crossing those
I love it. I
international
love Hawaii.
boundaries.
Yeah, it's
Oh
beautiful.
yeah, and yeah, I know you used to live out here as well, Dr. Nassim. So
Yes,
aloha,
I
and
did. Yeah, a couple of
hui hui,
years. Yeah,
come back.
it's beautiful.
I wanna hang out. And
Absolutely.
Martin, wasn't there some cool events? Maybe I don't know if these guys might show up, but you definitely you have that speaking going on. I know April
Yeah.
20th, your sensory room is opening up, right? Where
Yeah.
was that?
So it's going to be in Morgan Hill, and I'm part of a group called Corazon Care,
Yeah.
and we recently got approval to have the sensory room there for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully, I'm not mistaken. I have to look back at the messages, but we're starting off a little. We're going to start off a little slower, so maybe ages 3 to 5 at first, and kind of work our way up to see how it goes. And I'm just excited. And building a sensory room was one of the things that I'm going to be doing with my company. And yeah, it's going to be very exciting. And I'm working on potentially speaking at the Seattle Mariners autism acceptance game in August. I'm kind of finalizing some pieces together, and it's amazing. I know for me, April's exhausting. I mean, I was working on different speeches to come up with, and I think the difficult part is because we do so much advocacy, there really still isn't a whole lot that is done, because it's like we take 2 steps forward, yet a few steps back, and seems like we're back to square one. And I'm left pretty exhausted. I mean, I wasn't able to get to sleep until 3 o'clock this morning, from like my brain racing, like, okay, what do I have to talk about today? Or if it's what I'm going to say going to be beneficial for others to really start seeing that we just really want to be treated like normal human beings, and like not wake up and ask ourselves, are we going to get bullied at school or work today? And it's kind of just difficult to talk about. And it's like, what needs to be done to where we could finally have the autistic voices heard?
I love that, Martin. We need so many more people, so many autistic individuals on the front lines like yourself, working with
Mhm.
legislation and state senators.
Yeah,
I know what you're doing in Santa Clara and San Jose and Spire
yeah,
Autism. You're just a huge inspiration to everybody, and
I
keep doing what
appreciate
you're
it.
doing. Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Yeah,
so proud of
I,
you.
I
the
echo.
best positive. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I
Oh no,
echo
you're good.
everything Dr. Nassim said. That's amazing.
Thank you, thank you. And I remember I've had, after different speeches that I've done in YouTube or different podcasts, I've had parents come up to me and say, because of your compassion and your help for us parents, like we feel more welcome, or what's the word I'm looking for? Feel everything's going to be okay for their child.
Mm.
And my very first speaking engagement 5 years ago, I spoke at, or yeah, 5 years ago, I spoke at UC Berkeley for a small group sharing about my autism journey. And it, it, something was said after by someone that told me, you know what? I'm going to spread the word in hopes that others are not afraid to share their story. And so after talking, the speech ended, and the person came up to me is like, I really applaud your bravery for speaking about your diagnosis with the group. And this is coming from him. With the group that I'm in, I was afraid to share my diagnosis with others, but because of your bravery,
Wow.
I'm now comfortable sharing my. I'm Yeah, I am brave to share my story and share my diagnosis without feeling nervous, and that really shocked me. But it's like, if I'm going to keep on doing what I can to be an advocate for the community, to really help these parents, and to really help other autistics feel safe to share their story. And I'm excited to see where the future or what the future holds, because I feel like we could be like a phoenix, rising from the ashes, and the autistic voices will finally be heard. And I know we're still a little ways away, but I feel there will be a day that we'll finally be able to be accepted.
Oh my gosh, Martin, will you
Goosebumps.
yeah, will you please just cover us with your rays of gold and
Oh my
take
God, that song. You know what? I think
I
we
think
That's
should,
right. Your music. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, we could play that song as like our intro for the podcast.
let's do it. Yeah, yeah. Check out next week. You guys are gonna hear it. It's gonna
That's
be
awesome.
great. And then yeah, before we go, I just want to mention to everybody that we want to create a space for anybody to come on and talk about whatever they like. And we want to have you on this season. If you want to be here, please DM us. Uh, one thing in particular I have coming up myself on April 18th, my fundraiser is ending. So if you guys wanted to learn more about Da Vinci NCR services and the NCR-based direct therapy services development project, the fundraiser I have going on, you can check the link in the description, and you can also see it on Instagram and stuff like that. There's a link to the fundraiser. It's through PayPal. So if you see PayPal, that's the right one. But help us build a great new service model starting out here in Hawaii for those who maybe they haven't been able to access ABA. And I thank you, Dr. Nassim, for spreading the awareness for ABA all around the world for people who haven't been able to access it. And for you, Jennifer, for spreading the knowledge all over the world that there's good behaviorism out there for people who haven't been able to access it on their feed, right, in the United States. Thank you guys. Both you guys pat yourself on the back. You're both, heroes, and you came on the podcast. It meant the
It's
world
an
to us.
honor.
Oh yeah,
Thank you.
thank
That's
you so
I had a
much.
wonderful time. Thank you. I come back anytime you'd have me.
We might just take you up
Perfect.
on that, and you as well, Jennifer.
Yes. Okay.
Really quick, before we go, is there anything that you guys have going on that's coming up?
I'll start. I have so it's Audi Behavioral Healthcare is the project that I'm working on. I'll be announcing more, but and then just AISDubai.com is my practice in Dubai. We're looking to actually soon spread throughout the UAE, but those are the two things I would say.
Awesome.
Cool, cool.
You
Dr.
can check
Haddock?
out, I guess I'll just promote my blog on Facebook and Instagram. So on Facebook, check me out, Everyday Behaviorist, Instagram, Everyday Behaviorist, and I have a website, everydaybehaviorist.com, where if you subscribe to my email updates, you get the top pick of the writing samples, the stories that I write like twice a month or so. So it's not too many emails. And that's actually what helps me the most because I have some writing aspirations. So if you could
I'll
subscribe to my
sign up for
blog,
that
that'd be
too.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that might be better than
Awesome.
Java if you guys are reading. I mean, I don't want to
I
say
don't know
anything,
about
Java.
that, but it's
I
definitely
read
more relatable.
I actually read a good article in Java about NCR. If you guys want to learn about non-contingent reinforcement, it just came out April 2nd. So look that up, and you'll see all the research that's ever been done on feeding and non-contingent reinforcement strategies. Very
Nice.
insightful. Okay, Martin, anything you want to say before we wrap it up, and you give us some closing remarks that
Yeah.
blow us away?
No
I
pressure,
don't know
no
if
pressure.
I no, yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. I know. I'm sorry.
I do I don't know if I said this in the podcast again, but the quote about the flower and the
Yes,
rain.
that's right.
So I'll just leave it up with you. I don't think Nassim or Jennifer heard this, but I said this quote as it was pouring rain, and I was looking outside, and there was a flower that was getting ready to blossom, and a quote instantly came into my mind that I wrote, and it goes, "We are like a flower waiting to bloom into something beautiful. When it rains, that essence of life gives us hope we will blossom at the right time." And
Wow, it's beautiful.
because everybody has their milestone moments at their own time. and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And it's like some of us were maybe still struggling, but we are that flower that will be blossoming at the right time. So thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you all for tuning into today's episode of ND and ABA with Martin and Dan. We will see you next week, and take care, everyone.
Thank you
All right,
guys so
bye.
much. Take care. Bye. Have a nice weekend.
You
You
too.
too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
So nice having you guys.